Hello and welcome to Real Fellas Talk Sports. Well, here we are. It's Wednesday, 7 o'clock. We're going to chop up the week in sports. We may even take a peek at the events coming up this weekend, but we'll get to that in a second. Before I go a step further, you know I got to introduce the fellas. There's a lot of years of experience here watching sports, and I'm going to start with a guy from my neighborhood who's the gentleman in our neighborhood. I've known over 50 plus years, Mr. Larry Abels. Good evening, Mr. Abels. How you doing?
What's up, Chuck? And it might be 60 plus years.
I know. I didn't really want to tell the whole world.
How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. It's good to see you, brother. And Mr. Indianapolis, Indiana, who also spent a lot of time here in Washington, D.C., a class gentleman. He's representing today the Pacers, the Colts, his town. Mr. David Burnett, good evening. How you doing?
Hey, thanks a lot, Chuck. I am representing. I got my Pacers hat on. I got my Colts shirt, representing Indianapolis loud and proud. And I'm going to be loud and proud tonight.
Well, you are every week, so we don't expect anything different.
All right.
Well, look, you guys, enough banter. We got a lot to cover. We're going to cover a lot of games, the 4 or 5 games we want to get into. Philly and Washington, Buffalo and Kansas City, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, the 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks, and then the Bengals and the Chargers. So without any further ado, let's start with Philly and Washington. I know that was over about a week ago because it was a Thursday night game, but it was a good game. And it was a big test for the Washington Commanders. They fell short. Philly beat them 26-18. Philly is starting to get pretty good. Saquon was special. Larry, did we lose that? Did Washington lose that game because it was their, two really good teams, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, in a 5-day span? Or has Jaden Daniels kind of hit a rookie wall? Or is Philly just, starting to get their act together like they did in 2022? What's your thoughts on that game?
Well, I think Philly's just a better team, and they won 6 in a row, so I won't say they're starting to get their act together. They've got their act together. I think they're just a better team. And Washington, I was really surprised with their offensive scheme. They did not throw any balls downfield. It reminded me a lot of their opening game against Tampa, as if the quarterback, they were afraid to let him throw downfield. So that kind of messed things up for them.
Do you think they didn't let him throw down because he was injured, or that was just part of the game plan?
I'm not buying the injury. He's out there playing. He's thrown deep the weeks before. He threw deep against Pittsburgh and the week before against the Giants. I thought it was their game plan.
Very, very bizarre. Each receiver, their wide receivers only had one catch apiece. It's like 3 or 4 of them, and they only had one catch apiece. And I agree with you; they didn't go downfield. Now, David, what do you think of that game? And what do you think of Mr. Saquon Barkley and that offense? Are they starting to pick it up?
Well, Saquon is a key component in what's happening in Philly. Philly needed a dependable running back, provided he can stay healthy. Saquon has got an injury history with the Giants, and we'll see. But Philly, I agree with Larry. Philly is just a better team than Washington, and that's no slight on Washington. The Commanders are a better franchise all around, but they ran up against a better team at this point. But let's not get too excited about the Eagles yet. Last year at this time, they had an even better record than they do right now, and then they tanked the last 5 games of the season. So, and then went into the playoffs and got bounced out promptly. So we'll see. But Washington has nothing to be ashamed of. They've played well. They've got a good young quarterback. They've got a good coach. They've got a good management, good ownership. Washington has nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. They just ran up against a better team.
So Philly is 8-2 now. Washington is 7-4. Larry, do we think both of those teams are going to make the playoffs? What's your, peeking at the schedule going forward, do you think both will make the playoffs?
I'm certain Philly will make it. I think Washington has 6 games left. If they win 3 or 4 of them, which it seems probable, I think my money would go on Washington making it.
Yeah. How about you, David? Any thoughts about both of them or only one of them making the playoff?
I think Philly makes it, provided they continue to play the way they've been playing. They've won 6 straight games. Washington, it's a maybe. They're a better team. That's what we need to focus on. Look, I've got a Washington, D.C. connection for 25 years. I want them to do well. If they don't make it, it won't be a surprise, but they're an improved franchise without question. But I'm not going to say they're definitely going to make the playoffs, but they're going to give it a good go.
Yeah, they because they played last Thursday, that gives them some extended time to get healthier, get some rest, and they got to still play Dallas twice, New Orleans, and
Philly and
Tennessee, New Orleans, and Dallas twice.
Well, that's at least 3 wins that you just mentioned.
Right, and now it gives them 10 wins. I think they make their playoffs.
Right.
10-7 should make it.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. And on the reverse of that, I saw that Philly has Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Washington, and so they've got a couple of tough games left. So it'll be interesting to see how the NFC East works itself out. And Dallas has fallen on their sword, which doesn't break our hearts. So anything additional about this game you want to mention before we move to the next one?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, let's get into the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game. Man, Baltimore makes me scratch my head because I think they're a talented ball club. They now have 4 losses. And the way they lose is field goal kicking or turnover or interception or a fumble and so I got to stop making excuses. Larry, how good is Baltimore, and what did you think about that game, Baltimore-Pittsburgh?
I think Baltimore is still a pretty good team. They need to be a little more consistent. But that particular game, you named everything that could possibly go wrong, went wrong. Now, Derrick Henry only had 13 carries. Now, when he played Washington, they shut him down, pretty much held him in check in the first half. And I think Baltimore started passing more. But Baltimore misses 2 field goals. Henry fumbles for the first time in over 500 carries. Lamar Jackson throws his first interception in like 2 months or something like that. And did you see the last interception? The interception was the guy took the ball from the receiver after he had it in his hands.
It's crazy.
Kicker missing 2 field goals. So everything that could have gone wrong for them went wrong.
And a horrible 2-point conversion call after they scored the touchdown.
That was a little questionable there.
Right. David, now I know you love Tomlin. I know you love Pittsburgh in terms of like Pittsburgh, but you really love Tomlin. What do you think of that game? And do you think, David, Pittsburgh has enough to make it as far as the Super Bowl?
Well, anything can happen. Anything can happen in the NFL, not for long or the initials. Any given Sunday, all of the comments that we make about the NFL. But let me just say this, Baltimore and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh seems to have Baltimore's number for whatever reason. That has to be factored in. Something happens when Baltimore plays Pittsburgh, regardless of record. And somehow Baltimore has to get over that. Number 2, Baltimore tends to fold in close games lately, and particularly down the stretch, fourth quarter, something goes wrong. As good a coach as John Harbaugh is, he's got to look in the mirror and find out what's going wrong with his coaching, because somehow he's got to take some responsibility for these losses to Pittsburgh as well, and the losses to other teams in the fourth quarter, because they always seem to fold in the fourth quarter against a tough team.
Yeah. I don't. This is confusing. They even one thing lose to Pittsburgh. They've lost this year to the Browns and the Raiders, and they just got so much talent on that team. They have real quick. They have an interesting game coming up. Baltimore. They fly out to the West Coast and play the L.A. Chargers. The two brothers will be going against each other.
And the last time they met was a Super Bowl.
Oh wow. Oh wow!
The last time the two brothers met was 2013.
Right. For the other one went to Michigan.
Michigan, yeah, went on to Michigan. So Larry, do you think Baltimore's going to make the playoffs?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely, yeah, no doubt about it. How far they go in the playoffs, depends on how consistent they can be, and they need to show more consistency than they did. But yeah, they'll make the playoffs.
David, do you think that Baltimore's going to make the playoffs?
They should make the playoffs, but they're when teams start losing close games and losing for inexplicable reasons, sometimes things go haywire. And I would say on paper, yes, they should make the playoffs. Reality sometimes kicks in. They might not. I know I'm on the fence on that. I like the Ravens. On paper, they have all the talent that they need on both sides of the ball. But the defense has let them down numerous times this season already. And the offense, Lamar Jackson, who was in the lead for MVP up until this past Sunday, played in. He was average to below average this Sunday. Yep. But it always happens against Pittsburgh. Why? Don't know. So, they should make it. Before
I leave you, David, so I know how you feel about Russell Wilson. What do you think of his performance, and what do you think? I mean, is he enough of a quarterback to lead Pittsburgh to the playoffs?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
I think he has stuff left in the tank.
Yeah, he still got stuff left. I denounced him, and I've apologized. I wish I could call him up and say, Russ, I'm sorry. I discovered you when you were in Wisconsin years ago. He's had a great career. He's had a couple of rough seasons. I mean, look at Aaron Rodgers. He's had a horrendous season. Sometimes things happen for a while. But Russell Wilson, if he plays like Russell Wilson can play, he's the better option for them at quarterback. And he gives them some stability at that position and a winning pedigree to lead them.
Yeah. Larry, I don't think he set the world on fire Sunday, but he has added stability. He does look better. The Steelers look better offensively. Do you think he's enough of a quarterback to lead Pittsburgh to the playoffs and maybe even further all the way to the Super Bowl?
Oh, he will definitely lead them to the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs. Sunday, they didn't get into the end zone, but they did score 5 times. And that's unusual for them. They've been getting about 30 points a game since he's been starting.
Right.
And they play the same thing that haunts Baltimore, which I think David was alluding to, is the familiarity between the two teams. That haunts Pittsburgh as well. So they played a team that was very familiar with them in a close game. But no, I think he's an excellent choice for them.
Right. It's going to be interesting to keep an eye on both those teams. I like Baltimore a lot, and I hope they get their act together, and we'll see. We'll revisit them in a couple of more weeks to see how they turn themselves around. This game this weekend, they got to fly all the way to the West Coast and play a surging Chargers team. That's not going to be an easy game for them. So anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens with them. Let's move to the next game, which is Buffalo and the Kansas City Chiefs. Some say maybe even the game of the weekend. Everybody was looking forward to that game. Now people are saying things like, their quarterback, Allen, is now maybe leading in terms of MVP voting. That was a big win for them. Kansas City finally lost. So, Larry, are there concerns in Kansas City? And the reason I mention that, even though they're 10-1, David alluded to it. I think Philadelphia was 10-0 this time a year ago, and they just fell completely off the cliff. Is something wrong in Kansas City?
I don't think anything's wrong. I just think that they're not as good as they have been in the past, but they've been able to win games. They have a lot of guile. Their quarterback championship pedigree. They usually can win close games. And And that game Sunday could have gone either way, really. It was good that Buffalo's quarterback was able to hold the ball long enough to make that run.
Right.
But I think there will be a factor. They just don't look as dominant as they have in the past.
Right.
And do we have anybody in the chat? Just checking. I know a few people normally sign in around this time.
Let me pull that up.
And while David is doing that, is there something with for Kelsey? Kelsey doesn't look like the same tight end, the dominant tight end. Is there something? Oh, there's Lauren. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, Lauren, how you doing?
Good. Baltimore's a great team, but I think
she's-
I know. Kung Fu. How you doing, Kung Fu?
And we got something from Andrew coming up here.
Oh,
Justin
Andrew.
Tucker needs to make field goals. Yeah, he probably commenting on Baltimore.
Boy, that is a big point Andrew just made right there. I thought Baltimore was going to bring some kickers in to try them out, just maybe put one on practice squad or whatever, because Justin he's had a tough year. And,
He's had a tough year, but he's still been an all-pro kicker for multiple years, and you gotta kind of bear with him for a while.
Or do you?
I think you do.
I think one more week. I was expecting them to bring somebody in too.
Right.
I would not go away from a guy with as good as he is he's an all-pro. He's not just a good kicker. He's an all-pro kicker.
I think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't think he's an all-pro anymore.
I think he's.
Well, we'll see.
That slippage started last year, actually.
Yeah, he's.
Yeah, I meant to mention that when we were talking about Baltimore. His play is called falling off. Well, those are some great comments, and there. Back to Buffalo and the Chiefs, Larry. Is Kelsey same thing? Is Kelsey the same tight end as we've expected over the years?
I think he's pretty decent. Yeah, I think he is. I think their offense in general isn't. But watch them going forward. I think the pickup on DeAndre Hopkins was a big pickup. I was kind of wishing Washington had gotten him. And then the other running back, Pacheco, he ought to be back soon.
Coming back soon.
Yeah, so, they're missing some weapons. They've been missing some weapons this year. So I think once more of those type of players come back, that'll open things up for them.
David, in your thoughts on that Buffalo-Kansas City game, and where would you put – I will get to this question later, but where would you put Allen relative to the MVP?
Number one. Look, every week – It's like a political race. Every week somebody's in the lead. The polls show that Josh Allen is probably in the lead now. I can't take that away from him. But to see the game, Buffalo knows how to play the Chiefs in the regular season. They have to learn how to play the Chiefs in the postseason. Buffalo is a great regular season team. And Josh Allen is a great, great quarterback who can run, who can knock you down. He's fast enough. He's strong enough. He's big enough. He's indestructible. And I think voters for MVP are fatigued a little bit on Lamar Jackson and will probably give Josh Allen, provided Josh Allen continues to play as he's played, the MVP this year, if Buffalo continues to play the way they've played. There's a whole lot of ifs. We're only 11 games into the season, and the meat of the season is coming up. The weather's changing. We got snow predicted here in Indianapolis tomorrow.
Yeah.
So if there's snowing in Indianapolis, it's going to be snowing in Buffalo. It's going to be snowing in Pittsburgh. It's going to be possibly snowing in Baltimore. Right. Things change when the grass is white.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The quarterback that I think is playing the best, but since he doesn't play defense, he's not going to get any credit, is Cincinnati's quarterback.
Oh, my God.
27 touchdown passes, 27 and 4.
Every week he plays great.
4 interceptions.
Every week.
But he can't be MVP on a losing team
because he doesn't play defense.
We're gonna get into the Chargers Bengals game, and we're gonna be chatting about that in a second. Hey, David, I asked Larry the same question. Has Kelsey dropped off? Is there anything left in the tank with Mr. Kelsey, or is he just, are we watching kind of the end of that situation?
Well, he's gone Hollywood now. He's on stage with his girlfriend. He's 35 years old. He's a great player. He's arguably in the argument of top 5 tight ends of all time, and maybe by the end of his career in a year or so, he'll be the number 1 tight end of all time. He's certainly the top target for Mahomes. He's Mahomes' safety blanket. Has he dropped off? Yeah, a little bit.
Right.
You get up in age, but you know what? I wish I was 35. I could do some damage.
Well, you can't blame him hobnobbing around the world or around the country with Miss Taylor Swift and really enjoying a heck of a year.
When billions of dollars are involved, I'd run around the globe too.
Right. Do you think both of those teams will make the playoffs, Buffalo and Kansas City, Larry?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
They'll probably be the two top seeds in the AFC.
Okay, good. David, same thing?
Yeah. They're great teams, well coached. Both teams are well coached.
Yeah.
Both teams have great quarterbacks. They have highlight players. They should be there. Absolutely.
Funny thing for me, for Buffalo, and maybe Pittsburgh's the same way to me a little bit. I just don't think they have enough playmakers or talent or something. And
they got Josh Allen.
They do have a good quarterback, but is that enough? It's not enough in Cincinnati.
Well, Joe Burrow is not as good as Josh Allen. I don't care how many touchdowns Joe Burrow throws. He does not offer the one dimension that Josh Allen does, and that is a bruising, elusive, running quarterback. And that's a skill. That's a skill. Joe Burrow is very clever. He's nimble, but he's not Josh Allen.
But he's just as impactful. And
in his own way,
he
yeah.
plays great every week. Chase plays great every week, and their defensive end, Hendrickson, they all play great every week. Now, I'm not sure about the rest of those guys out there, particularly on their defensive side of the ball. But they got three guys that play as well as anybody at their respective positions, which normally, in a lot of cases, that would be enough. But
they're 4-7.
Yeah, and they've lost close games. And even with, we're going to talk about that now. Let's talk about the Bengals versus the Chargers. A little cheap plug on my end. 3 weeks ago, we asked who the underdog or what dark horse did we have to come surging. And I mentioned keep an eye on those Chargers, and they've now are 7-3, and they put themselves in a good position. They had another good game against the Bengals. So what is your thoughts about the Chargers, Larry, which is coached by Harbaugh, we mentioned earlier, and that game specifically? Any assessment?
I think they're a good team, but unlike you, I'm not really sold on them. And I will have to say that that was a game where the quarterback didn't come through last week. I think they had a couple of possessions, and they just got first downs. They just couldn't make first downs in the end, and San Diego or the Chargers were able to win that game.
Well, I agree, but the truth is Burrows was still 28. Well, there's a lot of throws. He was 28 for 50 for 356 yards and 3 touchdowns. And T. Higgins and Chase both put on shows as wide receivers. So, but you're right, 50 passes maybe is too much if you want to have some balance on that team.
Well, they had 2 possessions. Their last 2 possessions, they needed to make first downs on, and they couldn't do it.
Wow.
So that was really what it was.
Right. David, any thoughts about the Chargers and that game specifically?
I'm going to pick the Chargers for that game.
By the way, the Chargers are 7-3
now. Chargers. Jim Harbaugh is a good coach.
They played the Bengals.
He's been in the Super Bowl. He's won a national championship. He tends to bring the best out of players. And I think this is kind of a game that's going to start selling the Chargers in the AFC West. They're going to become 8-3. The Bengals, Burrow is going to have a great game as he always does. It's not going to be enough.
Yeah, they played Sunday.
They played last week.
Yeah, Chargers beat the Bengals Sunday, and now
my goodness,
right? That's okay. The Chargers beat the Bengals, and now they're 7-3. And they did beat. So the question is, and they play the Ravens this weekend. The brothers play each other. So the question is, can the Chargers keep going to the point where they can win the division that they're in?
No. They're good. They're going to continue to improve. They got a great coach.
Yeah.
But they're not going to beat out Kansas City. Kansas City will find a way. They'll find a way.
And Baltimore's going to beat them this week.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, let's hope so, Larry.
It's a must win for the Ravens against the Chargers.
I agree.
It's a must
I agree.
win.
They'll beat them this week.
Brother against brother, huh? How about that?
Well,
That's pretty cool.
Brother against brother has not happened since the Super Bowl.
Right. And so the Chargers have Baltimore, Atlanta, Kansas City, the Buccaneers, the Broncos, the Pats, and the Raiders left. So we'll see what happens with the Chargers, but they've kind of snuck into the mix a little bit as far as I'm concerned. So we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. This playoff thing has been fluid and things have been changing. The final game I want to talk about real quick is the Seattle Seahawks and the 49ers. My goodness. We don't hear much about old Seattle, and they're right there in the mix too, battling away. They had a big win against the 49ers this past weekend. We saw Geno Smith running in for a touchdown. So, Larry, how serious should we take Seattle? And what do you think? And what do you make of that division? That division has Seattle, the Rams, the Cardinals, and the 49ers. So what do you think of that game? And who do you think will come out of that division?
Yeah, who comes out of it is a real good question. The team that has played the best probably is the Cardinals, only slightly better, but they've actually played pretty well.
They're leading right now. They're
I think they beat the Chargers a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it's the Rams. I get those two mixed up a couple of weeks ago. I still haven't given up on the 49ers yet. They've had an abundance of injuries. Now, McCaffrey's back. I don't know how long Debo's going to be out, but if they could ever get healthy, I still would expect them to come out of that division. It doesn't look like it's going to be a wild card out of there because too many of them has too many losses.
They all got the same record. Debo was back this week. So was McCaffrey. David will correct me. So was McCaffrey. Yeah, I said that right. And three teams, San Francisco, Seattle, and the Rams are all 5-5, and the Cardinals are 6-4. So they don't even have a losing record in that division. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out of that. David, any thoughts about the Seattle 49ers game, and who do you think will come out of that division of those four?
On paper, it should be the 49ers, on paper. But I got a nagging feeling, and maybe it's just, my bias. I think Seattle will end up winning that division. They've got a new coach. I think that new coach is inspiring players, and Geno Smith running in to win the game was really impressive. Seattle is not the same Pete Carroll team.
No.
They still have the loudest crowd in football. I just have a feeling that they're going to do it. But this is as close a division as you can possibly have. 5-5. We're 5-5 for three teams, 6-4 for another team. And I think we're shorting Arizona, but there's just something about Arizona. I just don't believe in them.
I don't blame you. Why should you?
Their quarterback has played very well.
He has.
He's played very well.
And he's healthy.
Yeah.
And they had that receiver that they took from Ohio State. I don't know how impactful he's been, but I know he's had some good games for them so far as well.
Marvin Harrison Jr. has played very well.
Right.
Very well.
Right. Back to Seattle real quick. Another problem with Baltimore is we talked about this earlier in the last couple of weeks is their defense. Well, their coordinator, the defensive coordinator, who has been their DB coach, who was their assistant to the defensive coordinator, and then became a coordinator. In other words, he's been there a long time. He's now the head coach of Seattle. And I think they missed that defensive coordinator in Baltimore this year. So that's just another side note. Anything else about that game or any other game that you guys want to mention? Any comments about the National Football League that you'd like to touch on real quick before we get into the top 5 teams and the potential MVPs?
Well, we didn't mention Detroit this week.
We know we did. They crushed.
Detroit is just a juggernaut.
God.
If they don't win the Super Bowl, it's a disappointment. It won't be a surprise, but it will be a disappointment. I think they're the best, and I know we're going to do the top 5 NFL teams, but Detroit's just head and shoulders right now, 10 games in, 11 games in, they're head and shoulders above every team in the NFL right now.
They're so balanced, man. Their offense, defense, special teams, their running game. They're deep at all those positions. They lost a defensive player, though. A linebacker broke his arm this weekend. And so.
But the offense will make up for it.
We'll see how that impacts their defense going forward. But my God, they scored another 50-point game this past weekend. Right, exactly. Well, let's roll into who we think the top 5 teams in the NFL are. And I'll start with you, Larry.
So I'm going to say Detroit, Buffalo, Kansas City, and I have 2 new entries to my top 5, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
Yeah, I have those 2 actually. So Washington for you fell out just like for me. And then Baltimore fell out for me too. David, how about yourself?
I'm exactly with Larry. Detroit number 1, Buffalo number 2, Kansas City number 3, Steelers number 4, Eagles number 5. Okay, good. Yeah, I have Detroit, Philly, Buffalo, Kansas City, and I do have the Steelers as well. So interesting. We'll see what happens. But before we get off of that, the teams that are kind of in the mix that we haven't really talked about that might just surprise us in these last few games of the season. Vikings, we can't forget them. The Chargers, we can't forget them. The Ravens somehow will battle back the 49ers and the Packers.
This is this week's list.
Yeah. With 6 or 7 weeks to go, it's going to be an interesting situation down the stretch. Okay, if the season though ended today, give me your top 3 MVPs.
Josh Allen.
I'll start with you, Dave. I'll start with
Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I'm doing it in order, and Jared Goff.
Yeah.
First of all, keep in mind it's a quarterback award. Let's not get crazy about anything else. They're not going to give it to another position anymore. They're just not. It'd be nice to see if Saquon Barkley would have a chance. He's not. If this was 1999, he would be in the mix. He's not. Saquon. I think it's Adrian Peterson and what's the running back for the Rams?
Oh,
who won?
Eric Dickerson?
No. In 2000.
It's a long time ago, man. It was more than
those are the last two running backs that have won the MVP, and it's not going to happen again.
And Christian McCaffrey, I know he didn't win it, but he was in the mix, wasn't he? Right last year in terms of
he got hurt and it kind of took him out of it.
Right.
McCaffrey. In theory, running backs should get votes like they used to. Jim Brown was a 3-time MVP, but they play the game differently. We value quarterbacks and running backs differently.
It's more of a passing league now, too.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it so.
So, but I'll tell you what, the Philly keeps surging. If Philly keeps surging, we have to keep. Okay, we keep an eye on that Saquon. Larry, how about yourself in terms of top 3?
That's tough because I generally agree with what David said, but I can't go away from Patrick Mahomes yet.
Wow.
So
he's got 10 interceptions and only 12 touchdown passes. It's hard.
But amazingly enough,
10-1.
9-1.
Right.
Well, but how can he be MVP over?
That's why it's hard for me to go. It's hard for me to go away from him. But I pretty much said I agree with you. If I was going to say who played the best, I would have to throw Burrows in there.
Well, Burrow is playing the best in terms of statistics. Burrow is the best statistically, but he's on a losing team. And sometimes these MVP and Rookie of the Year, it's all political anyway.
Right.
And it's kind of hard to fault a guy who just doesn't have a defense on his team. I mean,
but he can't get the credit. He won't. He just can't be considered the MVP if their team's got a losing record. That's the
MVP means that Joe Burrow needs to overcome everything, even a bad defense. And
he's a requested trade.
So in other words, he needs to throw 37 touchdowns by now.
Remember in the old days, San Diego Chargers had this guy Dan Fouts, and
Dan
Dan
Fouts was
Fouts,
a
he
bad
would put
boy.
up something. He'd put up some. Him and Kellen Winslow and those guys, they would put up these incredible numbers, and they would lose 38-35. I mean, it would be crazy, but he'd have these big numbers, and that's kind of
going way back when we were kids. One year, Sonny Jurgensen led the league in passing. Charlie Taylor was first, Jerry Smith was second, and Bobby Mitchell was fourth.
And they were losing.
Right.
right. Hey, Sharice, how you doing? Good.
Hey, Sharice, I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay, before we leave the NFL and get to our next subject, which will be college football, real quick. By the end of this year, or even before that, as Larry indicated in the production meeting, what 2 coaches do you think will be fired first?
Ooh.
Larry?
I don't know. I mean, this is kind of like, well, the Jets have already fired their coach, right?
Yeah.
The Giants have probably fired his. The Cowboys have probably fired his. I don't know who's going to be first, but it's going to be a number of them that are out the door.
Yeah.
I think we ought to do it like who deserves to be.
Well, who does? Okay, I'll do it that way. Who do you think?
Doug Peterson gotta go.
He's another one.
Number 1. Number 2 gotta go. Antonio Pierce. And I'm sorry. I hope your son doesn't hear this because his coach is trash.
Right.
Matt Eberflus gotta go.
I agree.
And Mike McCarthy will hold on to his job. No, he'll be on the because Dallas needs.
He's not going to be gone before the end of the season.
Yeah. No. Oh, I know, but he'll still be gone. I don't think any of those coaches are going to get fired before the season ends. I don't think.
I think if there was one coach that would be fired before the end of the season, would be Doug Peterson because they're terrible.
That owner is so loyal.
The Jags are terrible.
Yeah,
and they don't need to be that terrible.
Right. All right. Well, that's enough of the NFL. Any other thing about the NFL you guys want to add before we turn the page and turn to college football? All right, let's get into college football a little bit. And by college football, I mean Indiana University. Just teasing.
Go Indiana.
It was a joke, World Wide Web. That was just a joke. Well, let's talk about the game of the week. That's Ohio State and Indiana in Columbus. Game day will be there. Indiana's 10-0. Ohio State's 9-1. It's huge. Indiana's a 12-point underdog. I thought that was a little bit much, but it is what it is. And Larry, any thoughts on that game specifically?
I think Indiana needs to show up and play. I've been reading a lot about the SEC teams, and they're very upset about the Big Ten having all of these highly ranked teams.
Of course they are.
They haven't really played each other. Only a couple of them have played ranked teams. So I think Indiana, for their sake, they need to have a close game or defeat Ohio State. If that happens, all should be good for them.
We're going to get into that part of the conversation in a second, Larry. So hold that thought, David. Okay. What's your thoughts on this? On the game of the week this week?
I think Indiana can beat Ohio State straight up. I really do. I think the problem with this whole matchup is the pedigree. That's the problem. Indiana has the worst pedigree in the history of college football.
Okay,
that's
David,
not exaggeration. Well, I'm cheering for IU, but I got to bring it up. I got to be fair. Right. Ohio State, one of the great programs of all time. That's why the 12-point underdog that Indiana is.
Yeah, IU has
and they're playing in the horseshoe. But if you look at who they've beaten and how they've beaten, Indiana has clobbered teams. You only can beat who's in front of you. It's not their fault that the other teams are no good. It's not their fault. But what I see on the field, and I've judged from football for a long time, I see a damn good team. But the fact is the pedigrees will work against IU if they don't make it close.
Yeah.
And if they don't win.
We haven't beat Ohio State since 1988. So it's been a while.
Well, but they beat them in 88. If they can beat them in 88, they can beat them in 24.
Well, Okay, so let me pick up on another point David made. Another quick point. So Ohio State, Indiana played Nebraska. Indiana beat Nebraska 56-7. Ohio State played Nebraska in Columbus. They won by 7 or 6, and they had the ball when the clock ran out. My point is, that was a like team that they played. Oh, by the way, they also beat Ohio State, beat Penn State. Penn State is ranked ahead of ahead of Indiana. And
Pedigree.
I'm not sure that's necessarily fair.
Indiana would beat the crap out of Penn State. Definitely. They'll beat Penn State like they stole something.
Pedigree is one thing, but the real problem for Indiana, a long pedigree, I'm not saying it's not. They've only played one team that has a winning record so far this year.
Well, yeah, that's a factor.
That's a problem with the voters. They need to show up Saturday.
The voters will factor that in. Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, Indiana doesn't have a track record, and that's the biggest thing that hurts them. If they were a powerhouse football program, irrespective of who they beat this year, if they had the same record, they would be given a whole lot of credit.
Like Penn State.
That's Penn State.
They didn't beat nobody.
You're right. Penn State is a perfect example because Penn State is not a. I don't think they're that good.
I think they've only played one ranked team, and that was Ohio State, and they lost.
Exactly.
They lose to Ohio State every year.
So Larry, you bring up a good point, and we tossed this around or bounced this around in the production meeting the other night. So Larry, how many teams from the Big Ten do you think will get into this 12-team tournament, and how many teams from the SEC do you think will get into this tournament?
So I looked this up. What happens is the conference champions out of the 5 conferences, each one of them will get one team.
Yeah.
That's one from the
hold on, Larry. It's all of the conferences they factor in. The highest rank of all of the conferences. Okay, go ahead.
So that's going to be one from the Big Ten and one from the SEC. Now, as it stands, 9 out of the top 10 teams are in one of those 2 conferences. The only team in the top 10 that's not in one of those 2 conferences is Notre Dame. I can't see less than 7 teams between those 2 conferences getting in. If Indiana shows up well against Ohio State, I think it'll be 4 from each conference.
Yeah, Indiana's got to win. Win or play well.
Have you thought about rounding out let's say that's 8, and there's 4 more to go. Have you thought about who will round out the other 4? Do you have an idea or a sense right now?
Right now, I think Miami's will be the ACC. I think Boise State will get one. They've only lost 1 game. They lost to Oregon by 3 points. So they showed up, which is the number 1 ranked team. The winner of the what's the conference that
Colorado, BYU?
Big 12. Big 12.
Yeah. The winner of that conference to get in.
And then
that's your 5.
And then
the problem I got with that is that at some point this is going to go to 16 teams. If I'm the Big 12 or if I'm the ACC, I'm being short shrifted. I really am, because Boise State plays in the Mountain West. I think it's the Mountain West. And they're trying to bring in the group of 5 conferences to equalize things. Boise State has kind of been a favorite, but they have kind of a pedigree too. So it makes them attractive to voters. They're not unfamiliar with Boise State. For being a group of 5 school, they always win.
But if Boise
State, the thing about them is they had that close game against Oregon. Oregon only beat them by 3. I'm thinking if Indiana has that type of game against Ohio State, they'll get that same type of consideration this year.
The best thing that could happen to Indiana is for Indiana to lose close to Ohio State. If they lose close to Ohio State, they're in the playoffs.
What about winning against Ohio State?
Well, that too.
Well, but they won't have to play Oregon.
But I guess what I'm getting to though,
I got you.
I'm getting with you, David. Let's say Boise State, if they have a tournament at the end of the season, I think they do. If they lost their tournament, would they get in?
If Boise State loses, they should not get in.
No, they won't. They probably won't. They probably
But
won't.
you know who should get in? Army, damn it. Army. And I know they have a weaker schedule, but the Conference USA is the conference that they play in is not a joke conference. Army's having a career, a career year for that school. Army is 9-0. There are only 3 undefeated teams in college football right now: Indiana, Oregon, and Army. If the committee is fair on some level, and all this, who's the best team, they don't know. NIL and all of that has changed everything. Good. Indiana got a whole slew of very good players this year. Got a great quarterback from the MAC. They got a bunch of players from James Madison.
Yeah.
Completely transformed that team. Completely.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what you think about Army after they play Notre Dame this weekend. We'll see what you say next week on the show.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm just talking about the fairness of the process. Army.
But they're not that far. Aren't they something like number 18 or something? So
I think they're number 15, 18, somewhere like that.
So if Boise loses badly, I still think they'll win over. Their close game with Oregon is going to be a positive for them. But if they were to lose badly, it's possible that Army could move up, especially if they beat Notre Dame. If they beat Notre Dame.
The triple option that Army and Navy run that causes them to compete successfully oftentimes against the bigger schools. I would love to see how Ohio State would defend that, because they would have trouble with the triple option. They will have trouble with it. Every team would have trouble with the triple option because they always do. I remember, when we played a triple option team, we had to practice against that for a couple of weeks just to be prepared for the possibilities of what's going to happen. Quarterback pulls out, and he's got a couple of people he can possibly hand off to or run himself. That's hard to defense.
Yeah. But I mean, if we're honest, and I agree with Larry. Larry always says, I'd rather play those games instead of people deciding in a boardroom who plays. But if we're honest with each other, if Army played Ohio State or Alabama or Texas, they wouldn't.
Maybe not. I mean, at some point, an Army and Navy can't get can't get transfer portal players. They can't.
Right.
But get Notre Dame this week.
Notre Dame has proven that they can lose.
Well, again,
they're in the top 10. If they beat them, I think that bodes well with some help other places.
It's a whole different conversation if they beat Notre Dame.
Yeah. Notre Dame struggles occasionally against Navy and Army every couple of years because of the triple option.
All right. Let's, as we get close to wrapping this up, the college football piece, let's talk about the Heisman Trophy. So we only have 2 games left. Larry, if the season ended today, or as you project out, who do you think will be the Heisman Trophy winner?
Well, the guy that Colorado's been getting all of the Hunter, been getting all of the press. So I like the guy at Boise State, and I haven't seen enough other guys to really throw other people in there. I'm sure it's a couple of other good players out there.
Right. I think those are the 2, by the way. David, what do you think? Who will win the Heisman? What's your thoughts on that?
Travis Hunter's winning it, and it helps that he has the most talked about coach in college football, Coach Prime, you can't even use his real name. He's Coach Prime. Travis Hunter is hands down by far the best player in college football. It's not even close. The only player that's close, as Larry would mention, would be his quarterback, Shedeur Sanders. That's the only person that might even be close. And then the kid from Boise State
is close too.
But Travis Hunter, if he doesn't win, it's a scam. It's a shame. He has to win the Heisman Trophy. Has to.
Well, Ashton Janinta, he has 1,900 yards already and 26 touchdowns with 2 more games to go, plus some playoff games. They say he could even break Barry Sanders'
Barry Sanders
1988.
had 2,800 yards rushing.
He did. But this guy has 3 or 4 more games left. And so they said he has a shot at maybe catching Barry Sanders. And by the way, David, you just said it. The record that Barry Sanders had is amazing. 2,628 yards and 37 touchdowns in 11 games.
It's incredible.
Crazy.
And that's in 11 games.
In 1988. That is crazy. All right. That's enough on college football. Unless you guys want to talk some more stuff. I know the SEC is really not happy about Tennessee being knocked out, but that's an SEC problem. And we'll see what happens after this weekend, how things will shake out.
Let me comment on that because they have a large influence on the college football, and this year is a trial year. Okay, they in the Big Ten have a disproportionate amount of interest, and I think it's because they want more of their own teams in there. So the SEC is even pushing that we don't even have automatic bids anymore, and they want strength of schedule to be factored in. They don't feel like it's factored in enough, and they might have some kind of argument there,
Right.
So it may change after this year.
There's only 2 conferences that count. I mean, when all is said and done, the way it's trending, it's going to be SEC and Big Ten. Big Ten will absorb a couple of more teams. They'll have 30 teams. SEC will have 30 teams, and we can sort it out later.
Right.
Well, they were thinking the top teams, even though they don't agree with all the top teams being in the
Big Ten.
Big Ten.
Because 4 of the top 5 are from the Big Ten, right?
But then like 5 out of the top 10 are from the SEC.
I know. The rest of them are from the SEC.
Yeah.
Right.
It's 6 Big Ten teams and 4 SEC teams. I think that's the number.
Say that again?
I think it's 6 and 4.
No, it's 4. It's 4 in the top 10 is 4 Big Ten teams and 5 SEC teams in Notre Dame.
David, after the top 4 teams in the Big Ten is a big drop-off. Illinois is the next team, and they're not.
Okay.
And they are at least ranked, though.
They are.
They are at least ranked, yeah.
Illinois?
And Wisconsin gave Oregon a hell of a game this weekend, 16-13.
Eventually, Wisconsin will be a top team in the next couple of years. They got Luke Fickell, who's a pretty damn good coach.
All right.
The SEC wants the top 4 teams to get those buys as opposed to a team like Miami getting in there, Boise. They're like,
you know what?
Why do they get buys?
You know what? In my opinion, the SEC ought to serve a penalty for all the crap that they did to black players for many years to come. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry.
Right, let's move away from that. We got a couple of things we want to cram in before we call this a wrap. And let's start with the NBA. So instead of talking about looking back, let's talk, or we did, even though it was last night. Let's talk about the Celtics and the Cavaliers game last night. Cleveland went into Boston undefeated, 15-0, and they played the world champ Boston Celtics. And it's also part of that in-season tournament game. And Boston won that game. Larry, any thoughts of that game?
That was a good game. Cleveland was without 2 of their players in their rotation, and Boston has been without Porzingis all season. But Boston had like a 21-point lead on them, and Cleveland came back and hung in there and cut it to 2 a couple of times. I think the final score was only 3. Their problem was Garland had a horrific shooting night. He was like 3 for 23, and he's been playing so well the last 4 or 5 games. And I would attribute some of it to the defense that Holiday and White put on him. But he was missing some open shots too. Actually, the 3 he made were kind of contested. So he had a hard off night, and Boston just shot so many threes and were able to hit them.
That's how they play. David,
didn't Boston hit like 20-some three-pointers?
Yes, and won by 3 points.
Cleveland had to lose at some point. No team has gone undefeated in the NBA. Not even the Los Angeles Lakers or the Golden State Warriors or the Philadelphia 76ers. And I just and the Boston Celtics. I listed all the teams that have won at least 66, 67 games. At some point, and Cleveland just looks like a polished team.
They look legit.
They look legitimate, and provided injuries don't mar the system, they're going to be right behind Boston in the end.
I absolutely agree with that.
And maybe right with them. They really look even
good.
yeah.
They got to stay healthy.
23, they still right there with them.
Right, I agree.
The only shortcoming, and I say that as a pun, is that Cleveland's backcourt is small.
It is.
It's a small backcourt, and Boston's backcourt is bigger.
Like you talking about like Mitchell? Is he in their
Mitchell
backcourt?
Mitchell.
Oh,
Yeah, Mitchell's 6'2".
They can't do anything with Mitchell. They can't do
Well, they
anything.
can't do it, but at some point, 6'1", 6'2", that's all you got.
And Larry, hey, hold on, Larry. In that game, White blocked a couple of those shots by Mitchell, and somebody he had a couple of blocks.
White is a hell of a defender.
White is a better player than I've ever given him credit for.
He and Holiday are very good, but look at Mitchell's past performance against them.
Yeah.
He always shows up against them.
Yeah.
Well, he's a great player.
Anything else about because we're trying to get close to the end. Anything else about the NBA in general? Like, give me your biggest surprise or things that you've noticed so far, David. Anything you want to?
Yes, indeed.
Go.
Joel Embiid being called out by his teammate, called out by Tyrese Maxey for being late all the time. And I think it's part of the reason he's not been in shape for several years. Now he wants to take back-to-backs off. Philadelphia is a team that's in trouble. Yeah. I think they've won 3 games this season.
Yeah, they tied with the Wizards.
They're a team about to implode.
Yeah,
and when a player like Maxey calls out a so-called MVP like Joel Embiid, there's something really wrong. Yeah. Really wrong.
Larry, any observations, any thoughts about what you've seen so far in the NBA?
Well, I want to follow up on what David said. I will give Embiid credit for accepting the challenge from Maxey. I'll give him credit because he owned up to it. He said, Maxey's right. I need to lead more. And Maxey is emerging as the leader of that team. With respect
he's a legitimate player.
Yeah. With respect to the rest of the league, we have a big imbalance in the East and the West. I mean, I think the East only has like 4 teams that are above 500, including some like New York and teams like that we thought were going to be good.
And my Pacers.
The biggest problems, I think, are Philadelphia and Milwaukee getting off to such horrendous starts.
They're injured.
Well, not Milwaukee.
That Middleton's been hurt all year.
Yeah,
well, he was hurt last year.
Yeah, they were still winning last year. Now, Giannis has been playing well lately, and they sort of look like they're righting their ship. But the Philadelphia, I think Maxey calling out Embiid was good because I think they're kind of thinking they could just flip the switch on. It kind of reminded me of the Cowboys a little bit.
Right.
It's a bad year for the 76ers.
Still November. If those 3 guys, Maxey, George, and Embiid, are healthy, March and April.
Let's see if they even make the playoffs the way they're going.
Playoff Paul is going to be not in the playoffs this year.
Okay.
They need to get it going.
All right. Let's talk about real quick before we wrap this thing up. There was an event this past Saturday in Dallas. It was a boxing event, I guess, between Tyson's and some guy named Jake Paul or Jay Paul. I don't even know his name. David, give me your thoughts of the event they had in Dallas this past Saturday.
The event is where boxing is going. It drew 60 million viewers on Netflix. That's the only good thing I can say about it. I knew this was going to happen. It wasn't a real fight. First of all, legitimate boxing matches are 3 minutes long per round. There were 2-minute rounds. Legitimate boxing matches that are sanctioned, and this one was sanctioned because there was money involved. You have lighter gloves. They had heavy gloves. So it was a joke of a thing, but Jake Paul, regardless of what you think of him, is a master marketer. He's a social media icon. Without Jake Paul, it would not have been much of a draw. But people wanted to see him. They wanted to see Mike Tyson. Now, Tyson had a fight against what's his name a couple of years ago, the middleweight, Roy Jones, and that didn't draw like this. So Part of the draw was Jake Paul. We got to give him credit, but that's what boxing is. But to mistake this as a real fight, no, it was not. It was in the area of WWE. That's what it was.
Well, that event should be on another network, not on the Real Fellas Talk Sports. Larry, what is your thoughts about that event on Saturday?
You just summed up my events, my view of that event.
Well, whether we like it or not, that's where sports is going. And that's where combat sports are going.
You know, sports is not going that way. That was it was an outlier, an odd situation. And
I would don't say that. I'm just saying Jake Paul will net millions more dollars on more fake fights.
But it doesn't mean it's sports, and that's what I think the issue
is.
I think it was.
Well, is boxing really a sport anymore? No. It's not what it used to be.
But
the two girls that fought before that fight, they went at it. Now again, it's not my cup of tea, but they boxed.
Yeah, they went at it.
58-year-old going against somebody 31 years younger than him.
You know who to blame? The public. If the public doesn't buy the fight, and that's the reason I wanted to talk about it. If the public doesn't buy this shit,
what did PT Barnum say?
There's a sucker born every minute.
Because I checked on it.
There's a lot of suckers.
Right. All right. So we're running really late. Any closing comments from this distinguished panel? And you guys have been magnificent today. I'll start with you, David. Any closing comments?
Yes, I'm just going to give a shout out to Anthony Richardson, my quarterback with the Indianapolis Colts, who redeemed himself a little bit with a great game. He literally led the Colts to victory this past Sunday and maybe got himself out of the doghouse. His problem was maturity. It wasn't just because he tapped his helmet and tapped out of a game. He wasn't playing very well, and I don't think he understood what it takes to be a professional NFL quarterback. I think now he does.
Good comments. Good comments. Mr. Abels, any closing comments?
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to Bob Butterbean Love, formerly of the Chicago Bills. He passed away a couple of days ago at age 81. And we may not know a lot about him other than us hoop junkies because he really didn't give interviews. One of the reasons he didn't give interviews is that he had a severe stuttering problem.
Yeah.
But even after he retired, one place where he was working, he had a benefactor that gave him speech courses, and he eventually emerged as a motivational speaker. So that was a great comeback on a personal level. And he was one of the all-time leading scorers when he retired.
Great player.
Smooth as silk from the baseline. So Butterbean was great. Good comments too, Larry. So mine are, I'm going to try to do this quick. My comments are, it's called perspective. Perspective. This distinguished group, we've seen over 150 years, excuse me, if you add
collectively,
over 150 years of sports. We've watched sports from way back to up to now. Things like, we've seen Bill Russell win his 11th championship when he was the player coach. We've seen Koufax and Gibson and Clemente and Aaron and Mays. We've seen Liston, Clay, then Ali. We've seen Alcindor, then Jabbar. We've seen all of these great running backs, OJ, Walter Payton, etc. Perspective. This group has seen a lot in sports. We've seen the great boxers, Ali, Frazier, Sugar Ray, Durant, etc. We've seen a lot, guys. And now we watch things like the Celtics and Golden State put up 43 pointers. It used to be the time where they played the ball game inside out, not outside in. People like Alcindor, people like Hakeem Olajuwon. I don't know if they could play in today's basketball. It's changed. It's perspective, right? And I say this all in closing. I mentioned the boxers. That thing we saw the other night where Tyson got 20 million and Jay Paul got 40 million. For guys like us who've been around, who've seen some of the great boxing matches in the history of this thing, I thought that was a bunch of junk, and I want to put that in perspective. That's the only reason I wanted to say this in closing. I know it's a
amen. Good point.
Good point. All right, guys. Well, that's it. Thanks for allowing us to go a little longer tonight than usual. The audience was great. Thanks for the comments from everyone. Larry, you were wonderful. Mr. David Burnett, you're wonderful. We'll see you guys next week. Go Hoosiers. Big game this weekend. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us tonight, guys.